Meditations with Ryan Slomak.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Meditations. I'm your host, Ryan Slomak, and this is a podcast dedicated to making space for conversation with interesting people just to see what we can learn from them. And this is episode 44, and I'm beaming in from Syracuse, New York. If you know anything about Syracuse University, you know that 44 was the jersey number of famed football player Ernie Davis, and 44 pops up all around Syracuse University history, so maybe that means there'll be some lore or magic that happens within this episode. Today's guest has definitely some lore and magic behind him. We have Mike Saltzman on the show. Mike is the owner of Voltage Video Games and Viridian Dice, both based in Syracuse, New York. Voltage Video Games is what he's primarily known for, a retro video game and new video game store based in downtown Syracuse, where you can go and find everything from your regular Nintendo to your PS26 or whatever we're on right now. But in this conversation, Mike is here to sort of share his origin story about both companies and just talk about himself as an entrepreneur and a creative. So without further ado, let's start thinking about Mega Man, let's start thinking about Dungeons and Dragons, and let's hear the story of Mike Saltzman. Mike Saltzman, viral content creator. We'll get to all those things. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out and being willing to have a conversation. I'm pretty stoked to hear your story.
It's overdue because we've been trying to schedule this for, I want to say months, right?
It's been a good long while.
Okay.
But we're not going to quite go back to the beginning, but one of the things that I think is important is that you've been tied to Central New York for a very long time, and as this interview continues, people, just to be upfront, like Mike and I have known each other literally since college.
First day, like orientation.
First day orientation, we met, and then our paths crossed years later. But you're very much tied into the fabric of Syracuse, of Central New York, but you actually grew up outside of Albany, having gone to, is it Niskayuna High School?
You said it right. No, that's right. Niskayuna, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about sort of like growing up, in that region, and what kind of stuff you were into when you were in high school.
Oh gosh, I don't think about that super often. I guess so. I've always been, and I guess we'll go into that. I own a video game store in a little bit, but I've always been really into video games. So from a young age, I was like, every time you could put a controller in my hand, I was playing it. I was waking up at 5 a.m. I was playing Mario 3. I was, Mega Man came out. Oh, I love this game. It's awesome. So I played all those like Nintendo hard video games, and I was really into that. I was also really into like Warhammer and like tactical strategy games and PC games, strategy PC games, and like Legos and Battle Beasts, like all the like pretty standard kind of dorky 90s kid / nerdy kid kind of stuff. I think that I really like grew up on that stuff.
Okay, interesting. One question I always like to ask people, just especially when we're starting off early, is like, do you know what you wanted to be when you were 12?
No, I think I was really thinking like, at that age. No, not at all. When I got to like my teenage years, I think I was thinking politics. I think I was like envisioning like running for office and doing that kind of stuff. I thought I had all the answers, which I think is pretty normal of like a 15-year-old kid, I got into politics at a fairly young age. I want to say like maybe like freshman year of high school, something around there. I started to like, and you know what? Know what it was? It was actually 9/11. 9/11 spurred me to start watching the news, and then I liked the news because it's kind of infotainment at that point. And I just kept watching news and political commentary, and I just started to engross myself in it. I would say actually even younger than that, I really liked social studies class. So that kind of set me up because I played a lot of video games that were like historic in nature, like Age of Empires, where you're forming these empires and you're building up troops and you're conquering neighboring areas and stuff like that. So and like Warhammer and that stuff. I've always loved that stuff. And then that kind of naturally led into politics and news.
That's really interesting that like you discover, and I don't know if you discovered this when you were younger, or if we're, discover getters are older and talking about it, but just like that idea that like real-time and turn-based strategy games were like this thing that was like a really big thing during sort of like our gaming era. And so much of that is about like navigating large groups of people and understanding how to create policy that like,
and they all have tech trees and stuff. So you're like learning like how the societies like connect, like, oh, if I build the temple, I can get priests, and what do they do? And then all their upgrades and stuff are all like based on historical things that happened in the past. So all of that kind of like gives you this like, just like engrosses you into these worlds of society.
Were you finding ways to blend politics and gaming when you were in high school?
I mean, I think I was getting tastes of politics without even knowing that I was like getting engrossed into political systems and sociology. It was all kind of like indirect. And by the time I realized it, they got me.
Obviously. And just for those of us who are kind of unfamiliar with like Niskayuna and that whole area, like one of the things that I have found kind of fascinating is like looking at the like notable alumni list on Wikipedia, for which you need to add yourself on there. But
I went to the 20th reunion, and one, that was really interesting, and I'd be happy to talk about that. But the thing I found fascinating was we did have those this person's done this and this person's done that, and I'm like, some of my accomplishments are pretty cool, and no mention of me, and I'm like, oh. But one thing I found that I really took kind of pride in was, as people were like walking around looking at these people they haven't seen in 20 years in a lot of cases, everyone was like doing this thing where they like walk up and they're like, Peter Chen, like remembering the names and putting the faces together. Some people like struggle, like, oh, I can't remember this person, but they look really familiar. There was like only one person that came up and there was like, well, who are you again? Everyone just came up and be like, oh, Mike Saltzman. Like I'm like, oh, I must have been a huge character. And they're like, yeah, you were very memorable. And I'm like, I'm cool with that. I'm good with that. It's really kind of fun.
Well, so like explain to us, what is the sort of like social dynamic of that area? Like, I mean, is it sort of like a wealthier community? Is it like...
Yeah. So yes, Niskayuna is a wealthier area of the capital district. In large part, I think the main reason is it started as a wealthier area because Knowles Atomic Power Plant, GE's Knowles Atomic Power Plant, is like right there. So I've always heard that there were a lot of like Nobel Prize winners that lived in the area. Oh, you've seen that? Yeah. And so that's like also where the more affluent schools are. So that's where like they all set up. And Niskayuna is known as very wealthy, which is funny because it's in Schenectady County, and Schenectady County is known as the opposite, as being like not as wealthy and a little more impoverished. And there's literally like a point where you're like crossing a street where the roads go from being like really, really nicely well maintained to being like absolutely terrible. And that's when you pass from the Niskayuna like line into the city of Schenectady line.
Interesting. I mean, it sounds like a school that had a tremendous amount of resources to it.
Yes. Yeah. Had a great art program, had great programs. Yeah. It's well known as one of the best schools in the state and also country, which is what everyone's like. A lot of people say like, oh, my high school was like number 5 in the country or something. A lot of people say that. So one time I actually did look it up, and it's not as crazy like number 1 as like maybe I was led to believe growing up, but it is like, I don't know, like number like 40th on the list of best schools in New York, which is already a state that like well funds its education system. So yeah, I guess so. Seems good. It was like one of the only non-New York City like school districts that was on this like list of the top whatever.
Yeah, and it like just having read about it, it seems like it's got. I mean, it was formed in 1957, which I think is like a lot later than I expected it to be, and like it's just got some interesting history. But you've touched upon your interest in politics. You've touched upon your interest in video games. The last sort of thing I'm curious about in regards to the sort of like early era of Mike Saltzman is your interest in fine arts and creative approaches to things. And I'm curious about like, you're somebody who takes a lot of pride, especially now, in like a lot of the designs you do for your dice company and things like that. And I'm curious about what sort of, artistic approaches you had when you were a kid. Like what kind of stuff did you like to make?
Man, I was like one of the kids who people knew as like the good artist. Like, it was like one or two of us in school at a younger age, and my dad once told me how he had like an old thing that I did as like a very young kid. I don't know, 3, 4, preschool, something like that. And he showed it to me, and I looked at it and I'm like, okay. And he said, no, the teacher told me that like this was amazing for someone at your age. And I looked again and I'm like, what about this is amazing? And he said, the teacher said that kids your age couldn't render like sky and sun and like a landscape. And you kind of did that, which he thought was like remarkable at the time. So I don't, that has no connection to anything else. I just thought that was really cool to learn that. And I guess for me, I really started taking art more serious in high school. And it was mostly because of this one like art director guy. I think his name was Walworth, something like that. I can't remember any name. So the fact that I can kind of remember his name is astounding. But he had a class where he was really pushing people hard to be better artists and to like learn the basics of art. And he was encouraging me, and he had like after school stuff too that I ended up going to because like I was a kid that like needed stuff to do. And that really kind of set me up to start thinking about art seriously, and caused me to, when I was going to school at Binghamton, I got in for political science, but I asked like, hey, can I be a double major in art? And actually, wait, the reason I did that was because I tried to take an art class, and they're like, oh, sorry, yeah, you'll be on the wait list because like we got to let like the art students in first, and then next after that's the seniors, and the next after that's like the junior. So like they need the art credits and stuff. And I was like, okay, so if you're an art major, you can like get into the class then, right? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, can I just become an art major? And they're like, yeah, you just got to like go down to the office and like sign a piece of paper. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just do that then. And I did. And then suddenly I could take all the art classes really easily.
Were there any specific mediums, or what specific mediums did you like to work in when you were younger?
Yeah. I think I didn't have a strong preference through most of my like childhood. I would use crayons and colored pencils, and I guess mostly like drawing, physical drawing. And then when I got to, it was like late middle school, gosh, we had a computer lab. And this computer lab had, say it with me, Photoshop 5.5 Elements, right? I think that was it. It was the first one that had filters. And being that I am an artist, I knew filters were the thing that you wanted to do. I guess that was more of being like a 13-year-old kid than being an artist. But filters, I did all the filters. So I started messing with graphic art in middle school. And then by high school, that's where I started to like refine into like, oh, I liked doing painting. I liked doing graphic design. And I kind of moved away from drawing, which is funny because now I do most of what I do is like illustration and drawing on a computer. But illustration and drawing is where it's like, that's where I've been able to monetize my artistic skill.
On a variety of different mediums, from t-shirts to dice to game packaging to,
Yeah, there's a lot
signage.
of things now. Yeah.
So moving,
Eat your heart out, Tommy Lincoln.
I know. Previous show guest people. So moving forward, you end up deciding to, as you mentioned, go for political science at Binghamton, and then sort of piggyback it with a fine arts degree. What was the appeal of heading to the Southern Tier for college?
Oh man, it's embarrassing because like how little thought I actually did give it. So my cousin was going to Binghamton, which already made me think that like Binghamton was a good school because he was smart and like he really applied himself in high school and everything. And then I looked up like, oh, best like schools for political science, and Binghamton was listed as one of them. So I'm like, okay, there's two like green flags, if you will. And then so I applied to Binghamton because like I had those two and nowhere else. And I got in, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm going there. Literally didn't look at another school, didn't know what Binghamton looked like, I didn't do anything I just said like, oh, it's a reasonably priced school that's not too far away, has a good political science program. Okay. That was it. Like, that is not the normal anything. And I'll point out that I did not get into Binghamton out of high school. No, because my high school grades were terrible. I didn't apply myself. I didn't do homework. I just did all the things that like smart people with procrastination problems and stuff, like, and who don't apply themselves fully because they're still a dumb kid. I took that trajectory. So I had like I don't remember, like 2.5 GPA. It was like bad. I like barely got through high school. Granted, my high school was harder than most, as we've described, but still, like, I probably could have done better. But then I went to Hudson Valley Community College, and at community college, where it's a little less dependent upon doing pointless homework and a little more dependent on what do you actually know, I did great. I had like a 3.7. I was on the dean's list or president's list. I did well. And then I tried to transfer, and literally everyone that was helping me with transferring, the guidance counselor at the community college, which that's like the main thing they do, and the people I talked to at Binghamton, when I was describing like, well, here's my situation. I'm in this little club and I'm in that little club and I have these extracurriculars and my GPA is a 3.7 at a community college. Like, everyone was just like, oh, you should be able to get in. That should be no problem. Apparently transferring in is significantly easier than going from high school. One, because it's a smaller supply of people doing that. Two, it's like a different trajectory, which they want to get like diverse backgrounds and stuff. And three, they view grades at a community college as much more like true to how you will do than grades in high school, which I found to be pretty true. So yeah, 3.7, they're like, well, you can't do much better than that. So I got in.
I think it's interesting. Just Mike and I were talking before the broadcast about the fact that I love the fact that this was the only place you applied for, and
yes,
I got rejected from Binghamton on 2 separate occasions. One as somebody coming out of high school, and one as a transfer student trying to get in.
Oof.
And then found my my way through the human development school. So.
What was your GPA?
We can talk about this, for public record, because everybody needs to know it. So I used to, when I would advise my students at the Manlius Public Whole School about going to college, and they'd get really self-conscious about their GPA, I was like, my GPA was a 3.5. And they're like, oh, that's really good. And I was like, at Fayetteville Manlius High School at the time, our GPA was out of a 5.5. So having a 3.5 out of 5.5 was, do the numbers, people. I had like a solid C average. And then
you're in my boat.
I know. And then when I went to I went to SUNY Fredonia for a year, and I think I ended up with like a 3.16, which wasn't terrible. And I honestly don't know what I struggled with, because I had a really successful year, but I was in a similar boat to you, where I was not surprised, but I think the litmus test of are you capable of college work kind of surprised me that I was, because I had such a terrible high school experience. And then transferring into Binghamton, I ended up on the dean's list every semester and whatever. So
it's funny. So you did about the same as me in high school, a little worse in community college, and then you probably it sounds like you might have beaten me at the big boy school though. That's interesting.
That might be true, but if we also want to compare what our majors were, maybe that might have something to do with it. Moving forward, you do go to Binghamton. You're studying political science, and you're studying studio art. What was it about? I guess what was it about that academic environment that you felt was successful for you, like that made it so it was a good place of learning and opportunity?
I think the biggest thing I learned from Binghamton was system manipulation and navigation, right? So if you can get a degree at a school like Binghamton, it means that you have to know how to talk and negotiate with people, how to set up schedules, how to make sure you're at the right places at the right times and handing in what you need, and making sure that you have the right credit requirements and all that stuff. So it's system navigation, which I think is very important. And that's, I think, the most useful skill I learned there. I wouldn't say it was like how political systems work and this specific thing about politics or that specific thing about art. I don't really think that was the main thing I learned there. I think the main thing I learned is just how to get things done and work with systems.
Well, I think the other thing too, and this is once again, I have like the inside baseball approach to your college career though, is I also felt like you were really heavily involved in campus life. Like you were somebody that, I saw all over the place, including the fact that you ended up getting involved with WHRW, the campus radio station, to become their general manager. Like it was, I don't know. I think if you go to college and you believe that like the classroom experience is the only experience that is there to benefit you, you will not have a valuable college degree. Yeah. But if you say, hey, I'm part of this little ecosystem and there are literal resources every place I turn, every time I choose to like get out of my dorm room, I probably can find something of value, then you're probably going to have a pretty successful college experience.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but that if I was going to point out one other thing that was really useful in my college experience, it was running that radio station because it gave me the background in management that I did directly apply to future jobs. It taught me how to work with other people and motivate them to do stuff. So you combine those two things, systems management and people management, and that's where you can get into where, oh, this guy can run a business. He understands systems to like figure them out and researching how to solve problems. And he understands how to like get other people motivated and doing work. That's effectively any good small business owner.
So tell us about getting involved with that radio station. Like what was, it's interesting to me because we're at a time right now where like campus radio stations are like kind of in vogue for like nostalgia kids. It's not.
Are they?
I think so. Like it's still, I think, a very valuable resource. I mean, SUNY Oswego, my employer, has like a very robust campus radio station, but it's not, when we were in college, like the idea that like
we'd actually listen to the radio.
Yeah. And there was like an excitement about being on the radio and being a part of that and like picking up CD samplers to figure out what songs people are trying to market at the time. The whole music industry has just completely changed.
Totally.
So I guess if we could just like talk about the culture and this little time capsule of like WHRW in the 2005 to 2008, 2009 timeframe, what was the culture of that radio station like?
It was transitional because some of these digital technologies were starting to take root and become very dominant. Like Spotify was not quite a thing yet. I mean, it might have existed, but like people didn't really use it. But iTunes and like having a digital media library was quite a thing. So it was increasingly like we didn't need to go into the record library to like go find something because your computer had 10,000 songs on it or however many songs, or there was definitely a lot of pirating. Like I would have a huge media library of MP3s. So it was definitely transitional. And there was a little bit of even friction between those who believed that like going into the record library was like critical to like learning new music and doing stuff like that, and people who saw like the benefits and the ease of having huge catalogs of songs right in front of you on your computer. So there was definitely some friction there, but we were still also in an era where if you played something on the radio, people in the community might hear it. Whereas now, like, I don't know. I can't remember the last time I turned on a radio. That's like not a thing I've done in maybe since I moved to Syracuse, maybe a decade ago. It's like not a thing anymore. So there was that excitement, as you described, of like, oh, you're on the radio. People can hear you. Who knows who can hear you? And even there was a lot of discussions that I've seen in the past in the archives of how the university was actually like the reason that the power level is kind of low of that station is because they were a little nervous about the students getting a little too much voice and power through this instrument that now I'm sure they do not care at all about. But yeah, in the past they were worried, especially like you talk about like, I think we were like 1965 or something like that when the radio was formed, maybe 70. I can't remember at this point, but I remember there was like Vietnam kind of issues related to that radio station. Or just like student power. I think the one thing I did learn repeatedly was that the administration is very worried about this large body of young people who have a lot of ideas and thoughts about how things should run.
Well, that's typical. Anytime, I always tell my students that like if you're in times of war, knocking out your enemy's communication system is the first thing you do. And on the flip side too, if you're around a bunch of students who are, it's post 9/11, like everybody is highly politicized. it's there's opinions.
It was Iraq War.
Yeah, the Iraq War is going on. Like there's it's a very, very volatile time. There's a lot going on, and it's a communication tool that's important. Whereas like these days, like taking a picture and uploading it to Instagram has way more of an impact than the millions of dollars of broadcasting technology that resides in the basement of the student union of Binghamton.
I'm gonna pause real quick. So before I did the radio station, there was a period when I was like miserable there. Like I just didn't like it. I didn't know I was there. And just my dad said something that I thought was really impactful and interesting. I called him and I said, I don't know if I want to be here. I don't have enough friends. I don't have things to do, etc. And he said effectively, that's going to be the case anywhere you go. Everywhere is what you make of it. No matter where you go, it's what you make of it. And he was so right, because I then found the radio station. That became a central part of my identity. That's what I glommed onto. That's what made me excited to go to Binghamton and come back. So not only was he right, but I think that's just generally good advice across the board for everyone. You can find your community anywhere. Assuming you're not like out in the middle of nowhere and there's just like a farmhouse and there's nobody living there. If you're in any place of size, it is what you make of it.
And I mean, studies have shown too that like people are going out less because they're finding their communities online. And that's not a bad thing. I think you need to find balance, but just in general, I think to your dad's point, like finding people that have similar ambitions and interests to you always will benefit you. Always.
Yep. And that's a great thing about like D&D, which we'll probably get into a little bit.
You make your way out of Binghamton, and I know that you did a good amount of work as like a freelance web designer. And
yeah, I did that.
Yeah, like what was, kind of dipping your toe into the like entrepreneurship pool with that medium? Like what types of clients were you taking on? How'd you decide to go in that direction?
I would take on anyone because I needed to pay my bills. That was like my main concern. And my main client ended up being an agency in Binghamton. It was Webworks was our company. Roseanne Saul Advertising Company or something like that. They had a really cool like teal colored building, which I thought was neat because teal is like my favorite color, as you probably know, because all my companies have teal in them. And one of them is literally called Viridian, which is like another name for like a teal, like color of teal, shade of teal. Anyway, this agency, I met them through a contact, through someone else that went to Binghamton, worked there. And so we connected. He said, oh, you're doing web design. He might even found me that I was doing that through Facebook. I have no idea, but like I ended up working for that company, that agency, through this person I knew at Binghamton. And that was really, really, really important in my grand scheme of my life, because he also ended up being the person that pitched me on the idea of opening our own video game store. He ended up being one of my partners in Voltage to start. And there's a whole story behind that, but we'll get there. And yeah, so but the websites, I was just like, I don't know, I already knew HTML. I self-taught myself CSS, and I was just doing basically design websites. They weren't the best, but I mean, we're also talking about like 2009, 2010. People are still figuring things out. They were okay. I think design-wise, they looked pretty good. The back of house, I don't know. I did the best I could.
Yeah, and like how long were you doing that, and how substantial of a part of your base income was that?
At points, it was like my entire income. So it was like paying my rent and paying my everything. So yeah, it was good enough. And I did that probably for like a year. And each website was like a couple grand, right? And I would do 1 to 2 of them a month. So, I made like 20 grand, which back then was enough to pay for an apartment in Binghamton and pay a lot of my other bills. I remember my dad and possibly my mom, but I think my dad was paying for my bachelor's degree, like my tuition. And then he stopped paying my rent once I moved off campus, or maybe once I graduated. But he was like, it slowly tapered off what my parents were willing to do. And I was finding like, I need to pay the bills. I got to do something. Web design happened to be something that worked out pretty well because you get paid like per project. And it's really about like sometimes you could complete the projects really fast and it's like, wow, your pay per hour is awesome. And then other times it took a lot longer, but it was fun. So I didn't mind putting my time into that.
And then you also ended up working for the New York State Department of Labor for a little while?
Yes. That was actually, I graduated, I started looking for a job. I got a job at Department of Labor. And then later on, while I was at Department of Labor, that's when I started doing the web design. And then I fully turned off Department of Labor and did the web design full time as I transitioned into a master's program for education. I wanted to teach. And then I learned more about the academic system and decided I don't want to teach. No, thank you.
So you end up seeing this opportunity though to collaborate with some people and to start Voltage Video Game, right? And it's gonna move you to a city that you're not 100% familiar with.
Yeah.
And start in a retail business that you have not managed before.
Yep.
Yep. And is going to put a significant amount of risk in regards to having to buy inventory and all these other things. And
all
I guess
true.
Give us the sort of, how did the seeds of Voltage Video Game end up getting planted?
So as part of the web design stuff that I did, I ended up doing a little bit of web design work and marketing for a company called Pastime Legends out of Albany. They're a video game store. At that time, they were a single store. They became a chain, and now they're kind of breaking back up into maybe 1 or 2 stores. A little family operation. And through kind of just getting my foot in the door and seeing their back end a little bit, I was able to see that there's not anything particularly complex about this. Once you understand some basics of how much to pay out and how this kind of process works, if you're smart enough and have the system, you can understand how systems work, etc., you could do this. It's not one thing I say a lot, right, is whenever I'm struggling with taxes or this or that, different elements of business management, I go, there's a lot of people a lot dumber than me who have been able to run a bar or run this or run that. So I should be able to figure this out. In fact, when I can't figure it out, then I'm like, this system is messed up. Because if it's designed such that I can't figure it out with the amount of education I have and whatnot, this system is bad.
I want to interject real quick.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that you and I see eye to eye on. There's a lot of things that you and I do not see eye to eye on. But I have used almost that exact same quote with a number of friends, one recently who I encouraged to buy a house. And he's like, I don't think I could do that. I was like, remember, 1 million people dumber than you have bought real estate. And, 1 million people dumber than you have taken that risk at a job. 1 million people dumber than you have started a podcast, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It sounds cheeky, but I do genuinely believe that is something where if you are at a moment where you're like, I'm a little nervous about this, take a deep breath and think about all the people who've done it and realize this is something I can accomplish. So I'm sorry for interjecting in there, but that is 100%, I think, a life mantra that people should buy into.
I have 2 thoughts on that. First, I was afraid of roller coasters. They seemed scary to me. I had a fear of them, right? Until one day I was just like, wait, if 8-year-olds are going on that and not dying, then what's going to happen to me I think I was 16 or 18 or something like that. What's going to happen to me? And that single-handedly, that thought process broke my fear of roller coasters. And then I went on one and it was awesome. It took an hour to have this 10-second experience. Anyway, the other thing I was going to say is, so I worked briefly a couple of years ago at a company called Wormwood out in Massachusetts. They hired me to start a new division for their company. And at Wormwood, the one thing that has really stuck with me that their CEO said was, you wouldn't think incompetence would scale well, but it seems to scale surprisingly well. Because you go into these companies, these huge companies, and they're just mired in all sorts of incompetence. But this is a multi-million-dollar or sometimes multi-billion-dollar company with all these incompetent idiots around. It's amazing. How does that work?
So scaling back to starting to partner up, you had looked at Pastime Legends and seen how their business model worked, and then had the gears had started to turn to start Voltage Video Game.
So I partnered with two people, Chris, who was at the agency, and his like lifelong friend, Steve. Steve was out of Syracuse, and he was kind of the money man, and he worked at Lockheed, I want to say. He was an engineer. He made a crap ton of money. He was put money aside that he can invest in projects like this. And the idea was the three of us were going to partner together and start a store in Syracuse, because like we looked around at different areas. Syracuse didn't really have any good game stores at the time. So we decided that Syracuse was where we were going to do it. I didn't want to do it in Albany because like obviously Pastime Legends existed there, you know? So yeah, Syracuse looked like an open market. We got some money together. I didn't have anything else going on. I just like decided like teaching's not for me. I leave my master's program. I'm doing this web design thing, but like I don't want to do that my whole life, and I don't know if that's going to always be there. So store. And yeah, we opened, 6 months after we originally talked about it.
It's a pretty quick turnaround, especially when you're developing business relationships with people and talking money and, you know, agreements for payouts and things like that.
Yeah. So we, it was pretty low commitment. I think we had like between the three of us, I think we put in something like $28,000, give or take. Granted, it was like 2012, so money was worth a little more then, but it wasn't a crazy amount of money. I think like 20 of it came from Steve. We were just able to figure it out coming out of college, the three of us. Steve with his job, and then me and Chris coming out of school.
So you guys end up opening downtown. From what I understand, you become like the face of the company from the beginning. You become the sort of like operations person. You're working shifts. You're taking things over.
Well, so originally Chris was going to have more involvement. Once I realized that like, ooh, this is like 95% my effort, 5% Steve's effort, and maybe 75% his money, it became clear that like Chris's role didn't make any sense. So I kind of pushed the issue and said like, look, Chris, you got to give up your percentage. Like this doesn't make any sense. So we ended up giving, I think he gave it all to Steve, or we divided it a little bit or something like that, or we renegotiated. So at that point it was me and Steve. Now Steve lived in Syracuse, so he could kind of help out now and again. But yeah, I was in the store, 100% of the time. It was like it opened or closed whether I was there. I was doing like it was my full-time job. So yeah, it would be natural that like I would just become an integral part of like how people viewed the company and how it worked and how its systems were all set up. I think that really got supercharged once Mario Restive entered the picture. He's a local like filmmaker and advertising person, or he does video advertisements, and he offered, just because he liked the store, to like help us with an ad. And that ad has over time just been really, really successful. People love it because it's this like bad local commercial vibe where I go, hi, do you like video games? Because I have video games. Come on down the voltage. The only thing we're missing is you. It's like that kind of like goofy nonsense. And people just love that ad.
And I think that was 2013 that came out.
Yes.
So,
1 year in.
For people who haven't seen it, it's, think about the worst green screen you've ever seen, and then amplify it where Mike's T-shirt is then part of the green screen, and whatever's happening in the back. There's lots of poorly delivered lines.
Really?
And
what? Wait, no, I did a great job.
Obviously, but it's hyper aware of its campiness and its the sort of culture that it promotes, and I think it leans into the idea that like it's okay to be socially awkward and a gamer. Like I think a lot of people see themselves in it as the like there's a confidence in the way in which things aren't confident in the delivery. And Mario, having talked with him about like that, it's been like the one project that he's done that somehow has like lived a life that he never expected it to. To the extent
Really?
where like
He's never expressed that to me. That's interesting.
well, and maybe I'm misquoting him, right? But
Okay.
but it's like, but just in the sense that like it was another video shoot. you know, helping somebody do something cool, and like he recognized the potential with the way in which not keyframing, chroma keying, something could come through, and you could you know, superimpose the background onto your shirt and things like that. But you know, just before you jump in, like it's for people who are kind of like, why on earth are we talking about this bad commercial? It ended up becoming a viral sensation. I mean, like, to the extent where, like, right now, I think there's over 1 million views of that, you know, on one of the locations it's uploaded. Like, I was looking at it today just to kind of put it in my psyche. And when you're talking about over 1 million advertisements, or sorry, 1 million views for an advertisement for a little video game store that came out in, where this came out in 2013, like, that's a substantial amount of traffic for something that you know, normally would have been highly centralized.
Well, to be fair, we do push it as a sponsored thing, but yeah, it also has a little bit of its life of its own. And I can't like walk into certain places without people kind of recognizing me and like looking and give me looks, and then I'm always wondering like, oh no, is there something on my shirt or something? Though that's happened a little bit less in recent years. I think it's just because the person in that video is increasingly not looking like the person that I am. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, that ad was great. It was really what we needed. I'll note that I put my background in web design and SEO, into practice, in that like I set us up with like a really good like SEO advertising or Google advertising account, so that whenever you typed in things like video games and whatever in Syracuse in the region, our stuff would come up. That's less true today as like things have kind of moved, like they've become more decentralized on the internet. But you know, back in like 2016, 15, yeah, we were all over the place. And I remember there were companies that would actually call us up and being like, hey, like other Syracuse companies, hey, your ads are like always popping up for me. Like, how did you do that? Like, can you give me some suggestions or whatever? If I have any skill set that's been like super helpful for running a business, it is like design and art. Both to design the company and the logo and like how we look and how the store, like how it's painted and our designs on the wall and our advertisements and all that stuff has just come from like knowing how to use Photoshop, having like a basic art sensibility. Like that's been, if I've been taught anything that I've actually been able to apply to my work, my businesses, it's the art stuff, which is like not what you'd expect, but is very true.
Visuals are important.
So important.
I want to take things just back a step though, because we just jumped right over it. But like, obviously opening any sort of retail location ever is kind of an anxietous thing. And you've got to get the inventory, you got to do this, that, and the other thing. What were prior to the sort of viral commercial, like what was the start of Voltage Video Game like? Like how did people respond to it in the community? Like what sort of needs did you identify that Syracuse had?
So just to back up real fast on that, one funny thing was while I was in the master's program at Binghamton and I was designing this like, hey, I'm going to go and open this video game store, I talked to a school counselor or therapist at Binghamton. And I was like, I'm really stressed, blah, blah, blah. And she looked at like my reasons for being stressed. Hey, I'm moving. Hey, I'm starting a business. Hey, I'm changing my life. Hey, I'm doing all these things. And then she looked at like my self-reporting on how stressed I was. And she actually said like, oh, you're actually doing fantastically well. Like just one of these things would like often cause somebody else to be like freaking out. But you have like multiple all happening at the same time, huge life changes. And you seem to be handling it relatively well. So actually just from that data point, I know that like I was actually more calm than you might expect doing all these things, which is cool. I guess I just kind of had a lot of confidence that I could do it. Maybe that confidence was ill-placed, but then again, I have done it, so maybe not. And so I was identifying my theory of the case, right, was that I saw Pastime Legends do well. And I figured, well, if their store can do well, then probably you could have a store in almost any city of roughly equal size. And it should also do well because people will like video games. Like, it's not like, oh, Albany really likes video games, but Syracuse doesn't. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So it was just about deciding, like, okay, is there competition that will knock me out or like make it really hard for me to be successful? And if there's not, then as long as I don't screw up, it should be fine. Now, one thing I didn't take into account was that Syracuse was a very different city than Schenectady, Albany was. Like, there are people that like live nearby each of the stores for Pastime Legends. Like, there are people who live like on the main streets in Albany. In 2012, Syracuse was like an abandoned city. At like 5 p.m., it was like no longer safe to like walk around the streets. It was just dead. So it was definitely a different type of city, but we did fine. The main difference is like Pastime Legends would do really well on the weekend, and then like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., we could have closed at like 6 p.m. Because like, again, after 5, the city died. And on the weekends, people, for the most part, weren't coming downtown. Now that has changed over time, but back then it was like, oh, this is a surprise. I didn't know it would be like this. My only background is Albany and Pastime Legends and that environment. So it's definitely like, I'm glad it's got more going on now, but like that was initially kind of like a cause for concern that like, wow, this city dies at a certain point in the day.
Were you guys doing any e-commerce, or was it strictly just like retail up front?
Strictly retail, and that is by design. So I looked at a lot of other stores, and I tried to pull the best elements of a lot of other businesses and put it all together and do what we were doing the best we could possibly do it. I didn't want to be like a little bit better. I wanted to be the best we could possibly be. And as a result, one thing I noticed was one thing that seems to really damage video game stores is when they start selling online. Because ultimately, like, you want to have stuff in the store for your local customers, because not only are you depending on them, but you're also depending on trade-ins. And people will only trade stuff in if they have something they want to trade for. So you have to have good stuff in the store to get more good stuff in the store. So it's like a self-fulfilling thing. And when you start just like letting all the good stuff, like we could sell everything in the store probably in like a week if we posted it online, but then no one would have any reason to walk into our store. So like, cool, we'll get like a lot of money in a short term. And I guess we could try to like use that money to buy more stuff, but it's limited. The supply of the stuff is limited. And again, you get some of it by trade-ins. So it would be short term. You would cut your legs out from under you if you did that.
Well, and in the world of like retro video game collecting, I always think about the sort of like parallel between that and like vinyl collectors, you know, where like going and finding that store where you find the game that you've been on the hunt for or whatever is like something you really want to do. Absolutely. And I feel like part of the culture of Voltage has always been, dare I use like the punny reference of like, it's electrifying to like find the thing that you're really excited about or the thing that you didn't know existed, because there's no search engine online for you to go and see exactly what Voltage has in stock. Like you have to develop a cyclical behavior in order to make sure that you are getting the goods and also becoming just a part of that culture.
Our one competitor in the area, at least when we first opened, was really like Microgame. They're up in Clay. I would say they were the best competitor that we had in the region. And one thing that they shifted to doing over the years was push eBay really hard. And I always thought that was such a mistake for exactly the reasons I just described. I'm sure they made money off of it, but it was in cost of their long-term business. Now, I never went in there and said that. If they're listening to this now, they'll hear me say it. I don't think it's a good idea, guys. You probably don't want to do it, but the die is already cast on that. You know, we've really gotten a good foothold in the area, and I think we're well regarded. When we've had break-ins over the years, including during the George Floyd protests, our store was like really badly vandalized, and there was actually a GoFundMe to raise money for our store to like reopen and recoup some of our costs. Yeah, we have insurance, but it doesn't cover everything. That's a misnomer that people have. So the one thing that money told me was the community really wants this store to continue existing. And that's actually another thing that my dad said. He looked at how much money was raised, and he's like, oh, you can't close. This is a staple. People want this store to be there. You can't close.
What is it about Voltage that you feel has made it that staple? Like, why do people care about a retro video game store in downtown Syracuse?
Well, one, I think they are unique. There aren't a lot of them. And it is a cool thing that even if you don't want retro video games, just walking in will give you like a nostalgic hit. And it's like an enjoyable, fun place to be that is unique. I also think that we just tend to treat customers fairly and well, which is also uncommon these days. People come in and they go, "Oh, your prices are actually really good. Oh, you'll help me with this thing even though I lost the receipt? Oh, they greeted me at the door and they have they have a fun environment and I could talk to people." And, all those things are novelties these days, and people like them and want to support those kind of the same way that Soundgarden, I think, is another great store in the area where people would be really sad if that store closed down, because it offers something really unique that you just, if it goes away, it's not like it's replaced with something else equally as good. A restaurant closes. I mean, to some degree, each restaurant's a little unique, but if a restaurant closes, there's probably another restaurant similar or might have food that's some overlap, or, one Italian place closes, there's 3 others. That's not the case for video game stores. It's not the case for music stores. It's not the case for these kind of stores.
Places for physical media.
Places for physical media. And even to some degree, small businesses. I mean, you could point to many, you just know when you're in a small business because you walk in and the vibe is not the same as a lot of other places you go. It is unique. And you, I think, are much more likely to get somebody who is actually there to help you and actually cares. Whereas, you walk into Lowe's or Home Depot or a lot of other places, and no offense to them, and they have many good employees there and they offer plenty of good services, but the person there is usually just collecting their check and they'll do the best job they can, but they don't have a personal commitment to making sure that you get what you need and are helped properly. There's not a personal commitment there, whereas there is in a small business.
Yeah, and I before we move on to some other cool things that you've developed. One of the things I'm curious about is, obviously earlier on in this interview, you expressed some very strong opinions about leadership, right? And about what management means. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about Voltage, and quite frankly, not until we kind of collaborated and I really got to see how things operated, though, is that, retail is known for having really high turnover. Mm-hmm. Employees don't stay at retail businesses for long periods of time, often because of pay, often because of working conditions, often because they're not invested. But you have had these amazing eras of employees that have stayed there for a very, very long time. And I'm curious about sort of what the management style is that you've brought into that business that you think has made it successful, and what types of things you feel that you've set up, or maybe that just have happened organically, that make it so that people want to stay working for your company for long periods of time.
I think the word that is constantly kind of going through my brain is fair. Is this fair? Is this reasonable? And I try to always ask myself that when I'm making choices and decisions and talking to people, even if they came in late, right? And I go, well, I'm late a lot. So is it fair for me to be too critical about it? Okay, obviously I want them to do a better job and to be on time, but let's not freak out. Whereas I know, for instance, the manager at the Department of Labor once absolutely freaked out on me for being late as he saw it. What he didn't know was I actually didn't leave when he thought I left and came back for lunch, and I wasn't late. But he freaked out on me because he was having a power trip or whatever. So I think you want to always try to understand that, well, one, you want to be fair, but you also want to understand, especially if you're the owner or a manager, right? These people have a lot of power. They are basically your partners. My employees are basically my partners. They have a lot of power to make the business fail. So the last thing I want to do is be unreasonable to them such that they don't want to do a good job anymore. because they have such power to harm the business, to harm me. Like, that's a bad, it's not in my interest to treat them unfairly. And that's something I'm always trying to remember. I've been part of different like video game owners groups on like Facebook and other social media. And I see one thread I see a lot, right? Is this idea that the customer is out to get me. They're out to screw me. They're out to cost me money. They're out to trick me. And my employees are screwing up. And like, what do I do? Like, I took away their pay for this, or they bought something they shouldn't have bought, and I took it out of their paycheck or whatever. I see that. And you might go, that's crazy. I agree. That's crazy. Never mind that. If you're doing that, you're just creating all this bad will with these people who are ultimately your partners in the business. That's a terrible idea. And it's not fair. Like, the business can afford to like take a hit here and there. Like, don't take it out of their pay. That's crazy. Use it as a learning experience. And I think if you approach business that way, your employees, your coworkers will see that you are being reasonable, and they will return that like reasonableness back to you, and will like working with you. They know that like, oh, they screwed up, but they're not going to get yelled at. It's going to be a learning experience. Now, I mean, obviously, if you're screwing up a lot and you're costing the business lots of money, well, then there's a question about whether that person needs more training or it's not a good fit. But assuming those aren't the cases, like, people make mistakes. And if you as a manager are not able to appreciate that will happen and be okay with it, well, then management's not for you. Because like, nobody's perfect. And going back to the customer example, right? Oh, the customers are out to get me. 95+% of people that walk through your door, the customers, are not trying to screw you. They're just not. And okay, maybe there's a couple percent that like want to get one over on you and trade something and that doesn't work or something like that. Most don't. And if you have the mindset that they're out to get you, well, then you're going to start developing policies and stuff that get that 95% of great customers and start making them not want to shop with you anymore. If you treat them like the enemy, they'll see it in your actions and your policies and stuff, and it will make them less likely to do business with you. And over time, you will go out of business because you need them. So you need to give people the benefit of the doubt and be fair.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, like, I know that, so if we're thinking about things like trade-in values or whatever, like how did you kind of come up with those metrics to ensure that you had what you perceive to be like a fair trade-in value for people's, belongings and games and equipment?
A big part of how I decided to do that was to use a little bit of what Chris thought, because he had a little bit of a background in that one manager, that one partner I had. He had a little bit of background in video game stores as well. So I used a little bit of what he thought. I also remembered what Pastime Legends paid out, which was very easy because it was a quarter of the value in cash or half the value in credit. And I just said, can we do more? And we end up doing a little bit more. And I figured, like, well, if they were doing fine on a quarter and half, well, then if we do a third and 2/3 or something like that, well, then we'll also do fine, especially if our competition is doing less. So I looked at what our competition was doing. I kind of used kind of the historical data I had and the partner data. And then I just started doing stuff and seeing what seemed to work. And we would adjust on the fly. And also I would just do a calculation. If we're selling something for $10 and we bought it for $4, okay, well, there's 60% in there. If I do that enough times, we'll make our money. If you only sell one video game a month, you got to make a lot of money on that one video game. And that gets into one of my theories about volume. So there's a lot of stores out there that do this, right? Where they go, our margin is really low, but we're going to sell a lot of them. So, we only make $1 on every one, but we're going to sell 10,000 of them every month. And that's where we're going to make our money. It's the, like Costco or was that Roast, whatever, discount outlets basically. And that has always been the way where I wanted to operate. Hey, we'll make it up on volume. And the main reason I like to do that is because I want to feel proud of whatever business I'm in. I want to be able to say, hey, you should check out my store. We have the best prices. or have someone come say, "Oh, I did check out your store. Man, yeah, you have the best. I'm coming to you from now on." Like, I don't want someone to support me just because, like, well, you're a local business or I like you. I want it to be in their interest to support me. I want them to come in and be like, "Oh, like, yeah, you're a local business and I like you, Mike, but like also you have the best prices. So like, why would I shop anywhere else?" That's my goal. My goal is that you want to support us by having, good, fair prices and good, fair policies. Fair came up again. One big problem with that whole kind of strategy, I mean, it seems to have worked. So like, it's working for me. So if this sounds good to you out there, you're thinking about starting a business and you want to do this too, it seems to work for me. The one problem is, if my competitor is selling a game, right, for $50 and I'm selling it for $10, and this is an extreme example, but I have to sell 5 of them just to match their gross sales. They only have to help one customer, and I have to help at least 5, probably more with the profit margin. That's a huge burden on you as a business. So it's a lot more work. But I think long term, you gain these customers that like will come back. That customer who bought that $50 game, if they walk into my store the next day and see it for $10, they're never, ever going back to that first store. They will immediately go, "Oh, what a ripoff they were." Even if like our price is just stupidly low, they're still going to see it and go like, "Rip off." And that's how to me, that's how you gain these long-term customers that allow you to exist for 10 plus years.
I think it's interesting too, also in the sense that like in the time, just want to get my timelines. I mean, this had happened a little bit before you had started your business, but like video game companies also started to rebrand themselves as with cyclical products. And I'm thinking about like specifically like sports titles, like the idea that, I remember being in there and we talked about the fact that like, you could almost create a drinking game out of the term 2K. Every time somebody came in here and was like, "You got 2K?" Right. Because that was the latest basketball title or something that somebody was looking for.
Which 2K?
Right.
Basketball. Like, okay, which one? The new one, of course, 2K18. Like, okay, for what system? P3, PS3. Okay, 2K. yeah. I don't know where I'm going. Sorry.
No, it's okay. But I think it's important for like people who maybe are unfamiliar with the video game industry to understand that like it started off as an industry where it's home consoles and having a certain amount of software is what you wanted, and having a variety of software was how you got people to buy your hardware. So I'm going to buy a PlayStation because it has the largest catalog of games. And then eventually, as it starts to wean down to about 3 main competitors who are selling systems, there becomes this secondary goal of we want to make sure that not only do we have the best hardware, but we have titles that people can anticipate coming out once a year or twice a year that are going to be big mainstay titles. Like I remember reading about the fact that, and I for the life of me I can't remember who it was, but one of the CEOs of a large video game company, probably around 2007, had come from Clorox and had looked at the way in which the Clorox business model worked, which was like people are going to buy bleach, people are going to buy soap. That's the money you can always guarantee, and then you put research and development into new products that then become cyclical purchases. And the reason I'm bringing this up in regards to your specific business model is because I think that like there's something to be said about like opening Voltage at a time where there's slowly becoming a bubble of people who are looking for vintage titles. And then you also have a business where, to your point, you need to make sure that people are forming lasting relationships, because you're not just selling the one game to the one person. Right. You're selling games to them, hopefully once a year, twice a year, 50 times a year for the next 10 years. And that's not always how people think of the video game industry.
Oh, you said so many things. One, you know what's funny? It's what you described of the Clorox guy coming in was exactly what the solution in theory could be from my critiques earlier on management, It's like, you don't want to just promote the guy who's been there the longest. You want to bring in someone skilled in management. So they bring in these people from other companies, which sometimes works really well, but sometimes they don't understand games at all, and they totally bury their own companies as a result by not understanding that there is a community behind a lot of these games. People have wrapped up their personalities into being a gamer or liking games. I would have said that about myself for years as I was growing up. I really love video games. It's a big part of who I am. So it's not like Clorox in that regard.
Awesome. So we've been going at this for a while, so I want to make sure that we're able to cover a couple other pretty cool parts of your career, which is, so, Voltage, you get in there, you try a bunch of stuff, you manage to make it work, and it gets to a point where it becomes a self-driving car to some extent. Like you get to a point where you feel really confident in the team that's working there.
Yes.
You feel really confident in the product and the way in which it's being sold, and you've got some headspace to start to think about other opportunities.
Yeah.
And eventually decide to fill your entire house with 3D printers as you start Viridian.
That's crazy.
And I'm wondering if you can tell us, first of all, what on earth was Viridian at its inception? And, how did that project come to be?
Oh, boy. Well, I would have never expected it to. So unlike Voltage, which was very planned, I planned to open this business. I planned for it to be a career or to like pay my bills. Viridian was like something that like, let me try this. I think there's a market here. So like I identified a product on the internet that was on a show called Critical Role. It is a very popular show. And I'm like, that can be made with 3D printing. And there isn't really anything like it available. And the stuff that I do see available is like not very well made. And it's like very expensive. So I'm like, well, what if I buy enough machines and printers that I can mass produce this at a higher quality and a lower price. So I'm like, same ethos as Voltage, and like enter the market with that product. Will that work? And so I buy a license from this guy, Luke, in Canada, who made this product, right? And his thing was non-commercial, but I said like, hey, can I buy a commercial license? And he said, sure. I start making it, and almost immediately it starts selling.
And we've used it and thing a lot.
Yes.
What is the product?
Condition rings.
What's a condition ring like?
It is a little marker that identifies whether a status effect is occurring to your character in D&D. So you're playing D&D, and the dragon spits some poison bile all over your character, and now your character is poisoned. And as a result, you have to remember, next turn when I'm doing something, my character is poisoned. So you put this little marker down that says poisoned, and then it's a good way to see and to be reminded that your guy is poisoned. And the next turn they get grappled, and now they're restrained, and you add a restrained ring. And so you add these rings that help you keep track of all the things going on the battlefield. Because it can get, especially at higher levels of D&D, it can get like confusing because a lot of stuff is going off at the same time.
Thank you. So you buy 3D printers,
yes,
and you're looking at a commercial license, or you buy a commercial license from somebody who had a non-commercial product.
Correct.
And then you end up buying some 3D printers.
Yeah. And the real problem at that point was keeping up with demand. So we would get orders in faster than we can print the thing. So we start buying more and more. I bought more and more printers. The second and third printers I bought, like, were already paid for because I already had like the money in my bank account waiting for like the product to be made. It was pretty crazy. So it scaled like proportionally to demand. Actually, we tried to keep up with demand. We struggled. And at its height, we had like 30 something printers in my house. Like, I had to like redo the power in my house. I had to space them out across the different circuits that I had. We had a problem where it was creating its own atmosphere effectively by heating up rooms to levels where the printers could not operate properly. So we had to like get fans and AC. I had to install AC in my house. Like, it was like crazy. It's like, and it's something like the guys at Wormwood, when they were like looking at me to come help them with a dice operation, which we'll get to, They came and looked at what I was doing because they got word that like there was a guy making all these things for D&D out of his house, and they looked at this and they're like, "Oh, you're a crazy person. You're a madman. This is like not something normal people do." I'm like, "Oh, maybe not." But that gets into something I say pretty often with small business owners. They all have this like gene or this drive within them. And what that does is, so whenever you're starting a small business, there's a point, and it might be like day one, or it might be like 6 months in, at some point in the first period of time, right? There will be a problem that comes up that is like a big deal, that is like you don't know how to solve, or it's like really stressful. It'll take a lot of work. There's something that'll come up, maybe multiple things, but at least one thing that'll come up that'll really stress and challenge you. And I think that this is where a lot of businesses fail. I mean, some fail because like the economics just don't work. But a bunch of others fail because the owners hit a point where it's like really stressful and difficult, and they just throw in the towel. They do, it's not worth it. It's not working. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, or they don't know how to proceed through. And most of the business owners I know, small business owners who are successful, hit that point and then find a way to push through. They just have the motivation to be up till 4 a.m., to go to sleep, wake back up, start working on it again, have burned hands because they're trying to fix these printers or doing whatever. And they're at the point of like maximum stress, but they do not give up. And I'll tell you, at Voltage, I had a moment like that where I wasn't sure if I was going to pay my rent. And then like, we got some big sales, and we kept going, pushed through. But at Viridian, my God, as I described, I was up till 5 a.m. All my printers were failing in a way that made no sense. I would stop using them. I would start using just one. The one would be successful. I'd go, what changed? I'd run two. Two would be successful. Okay, seems like we're doing well. I'd run half the room. Successful. I'd run it a second time. All of them failed. What is going on? And it was that, as I mentioned earlier, that atmosphere thing. There was something about the temperature that if enough of them were running, would cause all these failures. And there was nothing on the internet that explained this because nobody has been there. Who runs this many printers in like their house for this specific purpose? You start getting to a point where it's like, there's no help out there. Either you're going to figure it out, or you're going to fail, or you're going to give up. And I guess I have that gene or that push that I figured it out and made it work. But man, I had a lot of people yelling at me that their Christmas gifts were late and how I ruined Christmas. That was pretty stressful.
So obviously starting an entire manufacturing laboratory in your house is a little nuts. How long was that era of the company where like you were handling all the manufacturing in house and you were creating these things and you're just taking everything on one step at a time in Syracuse?
About 2 years. About 2 years, maybe 3. I think about 2 years. Yeah.
Okay. And what was because right now, obviously, this company is known for dice, right? It's known for a very different.
We've changed our name from Viridian Gaming Supplies to Viridian Gaming to Viridian Dice.
So much rebranding.
Rebranding.
So what was the sort of launch pad away from these 3D printed items into other parts of the D&D business?
Yeah. So another kind of mantra I have with business and operating is the idea of like pushing on a door, right? So like, I feel like when you're running a business, especially a business like this, retail businesses, you try a bunch of things. Hey, we're going to try carrying pins, and we're going to try carrying stickers, and we're going to try carrying clothing, and we're going to try doing all these things. I'm talking a little bit like Voltage and a little bit Viridian. We're going to try carrying dice. And you just try a bunch of things. And some of them won't go well, and you'll go, okay, well, we tried. And others will do better than you expect, or you might find it's a little easier than you might expect. So when you find that door that you're pushing on and it kind of gives way, you just follow that success. You just keep pushing. So we started carrying some dice, and they did better than we expected. They took a little time to get going, but once they got going, under the same mantra of like, we were underselling them compared to a lot of other places. We had some dice that we sold for like $8 that other people had for 15. That's a huge difference. And so they sold. And then we just followed that success. And we went, well, if we sell we're not making a ton on them, but if we sell enough, same logic, we'll do well. And yeah, dice was just one of those things that like the door kind of gave way. And we started getting more resistance on condition rings over time. We moved the manufacturing to be injection molding, but we probably shouldn't have, because probably we were getting that resistance, and instead of viewing that as a signal, we're just like, no, we'll just keep going, but we'll change the manufacturing.
How do you define resistance in this context?
Slowing sales, having to reduce your price, which I'm always in favor of being cheap, but like when you have to start being so cheap that you're not making enough money, that's a good indicator that like, oh, this product may have lived its life. We also started to see more and more competition. So all those signals should have caused me to pull away from condition rings. And we have now, but it took time. And now we're just fully into dice, which is like going great for us. So
cool. What was you said that you had dipped your toe in the dice pool. Where were you sourcing these from?
At first, China, and then over time we source them from anyone who will make them.
Okay,
right.
but from the beginning, they were ones you designed yourself?
No. So that's a comment. So people often think we make the dice, like we actually produce them like in our house or in a facility, right? We don't. We source them. And there are a lot of off-the-shelf ones that you can buy, right? And you can customize them to some degree. If you say like, hey, I like that design, but I want them to be, instead of green and red, I want them to be green and blue, you know? Or instead of this font, I want it to have that font or a logo or something on it. But for the most part, there's just a lot of available stock out there from different manufacturing partners. You just buy them and resell them. A lot of people think that like every company that makes dice manufactures them. Most do not. Even big ones, like even when you're talking about like, Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast, the guys who make or own Dungeons and Dragons, when they put out dice, they are not like, they don't have a factory that makes them. They aren't using like a part of their company to produce them. What they're doing is they are sourcing them from the companies that make the dice. So what will end up happening sometimes is we'll get like defective, boxes of defective dice to use in some of our products that sell like defective dice, which people like because they're like, they're under polished or they look goofy or something like that. We'll get stuff that like is branded with like Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons stuff because they're using the same factories. I would say like some large percentage of all the dice made are just made in China.
And then what about getting to the point where you started to make your own custom stuff, where you started to create things that were, more, we'll say Mike Saltzman branded? We call this Etsy-geddon. This is when Etsy started policing their platform more to kick off like certain types of resellers that they don't want. We were on their platform, and you could argue that like, we weren't following their exact guidelines. I think their guidelines should be more geared towards small businesses, but that's neither here nor there. They decided they didn't want our products on there, so we pulled a lot of our products off. So we're sitting here with, we have a website with a lot of products, but Etsy was like a huge platform for us. So we saw a huge drop in our income, and we're like, well, we got to do something to like counteract this. Like we want to be back where we were. So we thought that exclusives would be the way to do it, because exclusives allow us to be back on Etsy, because Etsy's totally fine with that. And it gives us something unique to bring people to our platform. The problem with exclusives is that they take a lot of effort to design, right? But your boy here has a background in art and started to like mess around. And the first thing I did was we had a product that we were buying from a company called ChessX. And there were these randomized generators so that you would like roll and it would tell you like how the next part of the dungeon unfolds, or roll and what type of monster is in the next room, stuff like that. And they couldn't keep up with how many we could sell. For whatever reason, we were doing just really well on selling them. Maybe it's because we started to become known for them because we had them all at a good price and we had a lot of them. But these generators, as we call them, these randomization generators, did well for us, and they could not make them fast enough in quantities that would like fulfill our needs. And during the summer, they just like took them off their website because they like were using all the ones that they were making. They were using for their own like conventions and stuff like that. So we were in these periods where like we don't have enough of these, and we were looking at their designs and we're like, they're kind of dated. They're
the art's kind of dated. The exact things that they roll aren't as good as like they could be. They were made like 10 years ago, where the way people play is a little different. So I just started working on replacing what they did with our own versions, which had like new art and like rethought what would be on the die. And we partnered with a company out of Poland, which makes very high quality detailed dice. They're called Q Workshop. And, we put out a couple of designs and they start selling pretty well. We put out a couple more, and not only do they sell as well, but they actually help the whole catalog. When you have a lot of different ones, people start coming to you for them. Now we're at the point where people are asking us to make stuff. Hey, can you make one like this? Can you make one like that? It's like, that's such a moment of like, that's so great. I don't know how to describe it fully, because it tells me that not only do they like our product, but they really want us, or me specifically, to make something that fits their specific role. Now, like, they don't want to, they wouldn't go to any company. They see the art that we do and they go, I want something for my specific purpose in your style, Mike. And it's like, whoa, that feels great. And we're becoming known for it, where people are approaching us with those ideas because they want us to do it.
I think there's also, just to chime into something you talked about earlier, and the idea that like you walk into an independent business and it feels different, the dialogue is different, the approach is different. Like, despite the fact that your company is basically 100% online, I mean, you have no brick and mortar store to just like step in and buy your dice. Like, the fact that there's like an online welcomeness to that type of dialogue, I think is a really important part of the way in which you've branded this company.
This is so important. I think this is just so important. It's true at Voltage too, but you're right. You have to work harder to communicate it through the internet. I want someone to feel like they are dealing with real people with a real story who really care about the business. I have part of our training with like customer service is that use real world language. Could we write a form response or a corporate response? Is that technically more professional or whatever? Yeah, maybe. But I think someone wants to hear from the other side. Like, if we screw something up, I think the best thing that we can do is say, hey, yeah, sorry, we screwed that up. Oh gosh, I always like when those SKU numbers are too close together, or those two types of dice, I sometimes screw them up. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, we messed up, but I got your back. We're going to send you a new one, or we're going to fix that for you. To hear like genuine, like human, like we made a mistake, I think like we encourage that. We encourage, like, if we screwed up, tell them we screwed up. Don't try to obfuscate or act like you're above it, or be, super like never assume responsibility or whatever. No, assume responsibility. Huge. So we are always like looking to just admit when we screwed up and fix it, and try to fix it in as little steps as possible. Could we easily be like, hey, I can't find your order number, please, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but we can also just look it up and say, hey, I looked up your order number based on your email or whatever. Like, and like, if we know we're going to replace it already, don't say like, well, what solution? Offer them solutions, or say like, hey, is it okay if I send you a replacement? Then they could just say yes, and it's done in like 2 steps, as opposed to you could go like, please give me your order number. Okay, I looked up your order number. What's your ideal solution? Okay, is it okay if, like, you could have 5 emails, or you could have like 1. Fix it fast. Don't worry about if they're trying to be that 1% that's trying to screw you. If you go back to my earlier example, most customers aren't trying to. So you could ask for like, send me 10 pictures of the problem to make sure that you're not trying to get one over. Just send them a replacement. The time and labor of your employee there, if they're being paid well, which I think we do pay well, like, I don't want them spending 20 minutes on your stupid like $5 replacement. It's like, the math doesn't make sense. It costs me more. And never mind that they have other things they could be working on. Just solve it quickly. Don't worry about it. Say, hey, we screwed up. We'll fix it for you. Don't worry. I don't know. Just like, it's how we operate Viridian. And I just think it's like a good way to, again, it goes back to that other idea of like, when I'm out somewhere and I mention my company, the response that makes me the happiest is when someone goes, oh yeah, I love that place. You guys have great prices. Or, oh yeah, I had a problem once and you guys like fixed it without like, it was so easy. Like I want someone to be like, oh, you're behind that? I love that. That fills me with personal joy and fulfillment to know that I created something that other people really like. And that, I think, if you want to get down to like the thing that like most makes me tick, it's I want to create things that make other people happy. I want to try to create joy out into the universe.
That's perfect because it gives me the perfect segue for we're down to our last 3 questions, Mike.
Oh,
so
wow.
you are somebody who, we've talked about your sort of artistic side. We've talked about your interest in politics. We've
Sure.
talked about your sort of business prowess.
Yeah.
And you just brought up the idea of like finding ways to bring other people joy and also find interpersonal satisfaction. And one of the things that I've known you for historically that you're getting back into is improv.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to spend a little bit of time kind of talking about that. Like, what is it about improv storytelling that, gets you excited?
It's just those, well, one, I think it's really great practice for me for like when I wanted to run games in Dungeons and Dragons or be the dungeon master as they call it, or game master. Being fast on your feet is really important, and knowing how to collaborative storytell is important. And improv is all about like yes-anding, as everyone knows. So it's about being able to help kind of predict out where the story could go and find the best ways of kind of making the most interesting story. And to me, I find it really enjoyable when there's a scene that just goes great, that just like beginning, middle, and end ends on a great laugh or ends on a great moment. And it just really comes together. When you have that moment of collaborative storytelling with somebody else, you didn't know where it was going to end at the beginning, but you got there together just off of listening to each other and working together. I find that really rewarding. And also I'm just being able to just practice like memory and stuff like that. I feel like I've lost a little bit of that, both with age and from COVID and stuff. And I really want to try to regain control of my ability to think clearly and remember stuff. I think social media has really degraded our abilities to communicate. Unfortunately, even though it's a big communication tool, I think it's doing the opposite. So improv is one of those things where you're just person to person, you're working together collaboratively.
That's awesome. And I think there is something to be said about just finding carryover between performance and real life.
Yeah.
And improv seems to be the perfect tool for that.
What's funny is I've recently introduced, so I do a lot of training. My employees at Voltage, my employees at Viridian, just generally like our brand reputation training. And one thing I've been saying recently, which is a new thing I've added to my repertoire with training at Voltage, is act like you're performing, because you are. And like, especially when I deal with customers, I view it as a performance. So I'm looking for like the ways to make little jokes and the ways to crack them up. Even if I'm just saying like, our credit card terminal, it makes like a ding when it's like done, right? It's like a toaster oven or a doorbell. And you could easily just be like, put your card in here and then just like, wait a second. Like, okay, here you go. Please sign or whatever. But what I've gotten into the habit of saying, because sometimes they'll like pull the card out early too and stuff. What I've gotten into the habit of saying is just like, okay, put your card in right there. And then we're going to wait for the doorbell. There it is. Your games have arrived. And then like moving on, like little fun things that just like make it engaging and memorable is like critical to being good in customer service and creating just like a good atmosphere where people like dealing with the other people. You come into a place, any place, and they say hi to you and bye to you, and otherwise the experience was good, you're going to be like, yeah, their customer service is good. It only takes like one more little positive interaction for them to go from that was good to, wow, that was great. Those guys are great. So you make one joke. Hey, oh, you got a turtle shirt on. Oh, we got a big turtle thing up there. It's like you're matching our decor. Look at that. You do one little thing like that, they'll laugh and they'll go, oh yeah, those guys are great. One little thing. That's all it takes. The bar is not high. But yeah, I view it as like, that's a performance too. You're performing the role of being a fun game store guy. So find ways to like make a joke. That's what I tell all my employees. Find a way to make a joke.
Awesome. So, Mike, as I come to the end of the show, I always like to just sort of make space. And if there's anything that's sort of on your mind or anything we haven't talked about yet, we can cover. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to chat about?
Is there? Didn't talk about the design process at all. Didn't talk about my perfectionism and how I like constantly just oh my God, I'm meticulous. I'm the worst. I think I'm like very reasonable because it's like a big part of my whole mantra is to be fair and reasonable. But I also have to constantly question whether I'm, as I call it, chasing ghosts with doing these little corrections that maybe like, okay, maybe it gets you from A+ to A++, but you spend an extra like multiple hours. That's what I've really struggled with, perfectionism. I always want my stuff to be the best, which has probably come across to some degree in this conversation. And I always have to just like wonder if I'm like pushing it too far and driving people crazy. I might be. In fact, if you want to find my ex-employees and have them say one negative thing about me, it's probably that I'm like too meticulous or I'm obsessed with like the little details sometimes.
There's the whole like art is never finished, only abandoned statement.
Right. Or it's never finished. Wait, how do I say it? I say it. I go, it's not truly done. I just stopped working on it. There you go.
Awesome.
Or I called it good enough. Because at a certain point, you just got to go, it's not worth the effort at this point. Or my indicator for when I think a design, like a dice design, is truly done is when I'm doing a revision and I'm questioning how much it's really improving it. If I'm like starting to struggle with like, okay, it might be a little better, but I'm not sure, I know, okay, it's time just to stop. I'm no longer making improvements.
I love it. Well, thank you for that. And then, despite your total hatred of social media, for people who are interested in following Mike Saltzman or his businesses, where are the places to find you?
So for Voltage, I believe we're mostly on Facebook and then maybe Instagram, but Facebook for Voltage Video Games. It's just at Voltage Video Games, one word. I guess that's how all ats work. For my dice company, if you like Dungeons and Dragons, dice, or just like cool, artistic, fun, fantasy designs, that would be Viridian Dice. And we're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, probably something else that's like I don't even know about yet. We're on TikTok. Yeah, we're on all of those. So that's Viridian Dice. It's VI.
It will be in the show notes.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Hey, Ryan, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much for coming, Mike. This was a delightful chat. Thanks so much for being on the show, Mike. It's so rare that I get to have a conversation with a viral mimic character. So thanks for bringing your spirit of enthusiasm and excitement and entrepreneurship on the show. For listeners, I strongly suggest if you're in downtown Syracuse, go check out Voltage Video Games. If you're online, check out Viridian Dice and see what sort of products are going on and see what fair means in the commercial market. Moving ahead, on April 9th, I am going to have Daniel Handler on the show for episode 45. And if you're there just quizzically looking at your computer screen or your phone or looking into the sky wondering who Daniel Handler is, he is more famously known as Lemony Snicket, the writer of the book series A Series of Unfortunate Events. He is going to be on the show talking about his discovery of writing, the creative process behind A Series of Unfortunate Events, what it was like to partially work on the movie and partially work on the TV series, and to explain his new memoir, And Then What Else. So if you're somebody who is interested in children's literature, interested in the writing process, or just want to find another amazing personality to hear a story from, tune in to episode 45 on April 9th of Meditations with Ryan Zlomek for my conversation with Daniel Handler, aka Lemony Snicket. Equally, if you're looking for some more play in your listening, I strongly suggest checking out the back catalog. On episode 43, I talk about improv games with the Whose Line Is It Anyway music director Laura Hall. On episode 40, I talk with local storyboard artist and illustrator Mike Borkowski about working on amazing shows such as Harley Quinn and Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot, and hear his origin story as an illustrator. On episode 22, I sit down with Andrew and Kristen Looney, the owners of the card game company Looney Labs and the designers of the card game Flux. On episode 20, I talk with local Amanda Hughes, the owner of the ice cream stand, about her play in the Frozen Treats arena. And on episode 12, I talk with Kyla Yeager about the relationship between neurodivergence and art making. Otherwise, if you're looking for something else to learn from, take a look in that back catalog. I promise there is something there for you. If you're interested in learning more about my own personal work, you can find The World of Ryan Zlomek online on Facebook. You can find @Ryan Zlomek on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky, or you can email meditations@ryanzlomek.com. I'm always excited to hear from listeners and just hear what makes you tick. But as always, we've come to that time in the show where it's time for you to do something. Please go out in the world, make space for conversation, because you just might learn something. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you. Have a wonderful day.